So welcome to this week's video, and this week I'm talking to Dr. Jennifer Lawler about the importance of referencing and how to reference. This is probably very important at this stage in the process where you're thinking about submitting your literature review, and it's important that you make sure that you get your referencing style right. So thanks very much, Jennifer, for talking to us today. So let's start by maybe saying, why does referencing matter? Why do students have to care about referencing properly?
Well, during the preparation of any written piece of material, be it an assessment, a group project, and indeed the dissertation at undergrad and master's level, all students have to acknowledge the source of their informational material, be it from a book source, be it a journal article, an edited book, indeed any form of web-based or internet informational sources. They have got to acknowledge the full biographical information of that author or authors. So from the school's position, the Harvard system of referencing has been identified and adopted as the referencing convention for all written pieces of material. And that would indeed cover the dissertation.
So that's a requirement, so the students have to do it.
Oh, it is indeed a requirement.
And it's also very important probably for us to say why it's important, because sometimes when they read journal articles, if they find something they're interested in, the only way they can go back and find the original source is if somebody has referenced it properly. So that's why it's important, even in a practical point of view, separate from the dissertation, isn't it?
Very much so, and dissertation aside, it is important for students to develop a number of informational sources, be they from articles or books, of the key trains of thoughts in a particular topic. And in order to gather all that information, they need to start referencing the material from whence.
And also, doesn't it shows then that the student isn't pretending it's their own work, they're acknowledging it's somebody else's work, and it moves you away from the whole worry about plagiarism, which sometimes students have, and that as lecturers we have.
It's so important. You've got to reference the material that you're utilising, because it is somebody else's work. And unless you go out and undertake primary research yourself, as you will be doing, for example, in a group assessment or a dissertation, you have got to identify the source of this material. So the golden rule of our system, which is the Harvard system of referencing, is to be correct, complete and consistent. And that goes for all online and indeed offline sources of information.
Okay, so let's look at the specifics. Okay, so let's take first of all maybe journal articles, so that's what we're referencing them. So what's the style? First of all, we should say that they should look at the reference handbook, isn't it, for them to find guidelines?
Yes, and we have the reference handbook here, and it's also available online on the school website.
So it's also available in web courses as well.
Web courses, of course. So students, if they are using any form of informational source, they've got to reference it. So you mentioned there a journal article. In a list of references or a bibliography, you've got to identify from the start the name of the author, i.e. the surname, their initials, the year of publication, the title of the actual article, the title of the journal from which it has come from. And then you also need to put in volume, issue number and page numbers. Page numbers are very important for an article. And again, this is identified in the reference handbook.
And that's easy enough. It's a pattern, isn't it? Once you get used to it. I've heard somebody talk about referencing as like a cookbook. You know what I mean? You just follow the recipe. You do what it says, and you just do it. You follow the steps, and you just get into the habit of that's what you do.
Very much so. You know, the more frequent you use the Harvard system, the more consistent you are in relation to the format and structure of referencing.
And just to note as well for students, in this system, we would only be putting the references in the in the bibliography at the back of the text. You never fully reference inside the text, you just put the author's surname and the year.
That's right, in the main body of the text. And if you are quoting directly or indeed just paraphrasing someone else's material, it's the norm to put, if it's a paraphrased piece of material, it's the author's surname and the year. If it's a direct quote or citation, it is the author's surname, the year and the page number from which that quote or citation came from. Otherwise, if it has been directly quoted within the main body of the text or paraphrased, it goes in your list of references. I know some lecturers do differentiate between a list of references and a bibliography.
Let's clear that up, okay? What do we mean is the difference?
A list of references is simply that, a list of all the references that you have utilised through a direct citation or through paraphrasing in the main body of your text. But, Zili, you will have utilised other information. You will have perhaps started off a particular topic area and looked at a number of textbooks or indeed newspaper articles. And whilst they have informed your understanding of the area, you may not have directly alluded to them.
Yeah.
But still, because they did inform your understanding of the area, they should go into an overall bibliography at the end of your work.
Okay. For the dissertation, what we would have is the things that they've actually used and referenced. And I think probably a rule of thumb as well is that if something has influenced you, then you should incorporate it into the text, shouldn't you, as well,
Yes.
if you can. And
Yes.
then it will be then exhibited then at the end of the document.
Yes, that's important.
Okay, so another type of reference then are book chapters or books as themselves.
Okay, well, your basic book reference, again, very similar to the journal format, is the author, the author's surname, followed by their initials, the year of publication, the title of the book, and then the place of publication and the publisher. And all that detail can be found in the dust cover of the textbook itself.
So when you open the front cover, you see everything you need.
You see all that information on the first couple of pages. And again, it's important to be consistent when using that format.
And just saying that, another tip I think probably for students is that don't just do your bibliography or references at the very end of the document, because you won't be able to find everything that you have read. So it's important that if you're note taking or photocopying, that you have the information you need there in order to then later on do the bibliography.
And that's very important. Open up a file on your computer and start a list of references file.
Yes.
And every time you source a particular journal article or a book, you add that reference information immediately.
And that saves a huge amount of time at the end. That
It
might
does.
sound like students now go, oh, that's too much work, I'll worry about it in the end. But that's a huge job at the end to start from scratch and try to go back and find all
very
the references.
challenging once you get to the end of your work to go back and start relocating sources, because a lot of students won't remember where they got these sources from. So start as you mean to finish. And certainly open up that all-important list of references file on your PC and keep track of all those sources on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And if you feel you read the things on the bus or the train, you don't have electronic version, use index cards, the old-fashioned way of doing it.
Yes.
Similarly, or a piece of paper and write along. But there's some ways that you have a record of everything before you come to the end.
Yes,
and start
that's
panicking.
so important. Yes.
Okay, and then a book chapter.
Okay, well, if it's a book chapter within, we'll say, an edited book, again, it'll be the actual specific book chapter information initially. So it'll be the author of the book chapter, followed by their initials of their Christian name, the year of publication, and the title of the chapter, followed by the word in, and the overall editor or editors of that book, followed by the year of publication and the title of that edited book, with the place of publication and then the publisher.
Okay. And again, while this might seem tricky, once you open the reference handbook, it's easy enough to follow the process and the steps.
Yes.
And I mean, there's similarities with all these, isn't there? I mean, the similarity is it's always second name first, followed by initials, followed by year, and then title, and then we start getting slightly different. So that's a sort of rule of thumb as a way of starting.
Yes, and students often ask, well, how do we, for example, reference online or web-based or
that's
internet
actually going to ask you,
sources?
because they're always the tricky ones. I always, myself, am unsure about doing those.
Yeah, well, again,
Changes.
the simple format is in the same way that you would reference a journal or a book. It's the exact same information. The author, if there is one, the initials of their Christian name, the year of publication, the title of the article, perhaps from an online, or the title of the company report that you're reading online, followed by the URL address and the date on which you accessed that information, because that gives an indication as to the timeliness of that particular piece of information, the extent to which it is a contemporary piece of research.
Okay, so then for online references then in the text, what should be the putting? So it's fine if there's an author and a clear author, but let's say sometimes we have sources and we don't actually have an author. It's a report. Then how do we reference that? Sometimes do we reference them in the text, in the body of the text, or are they always in the bibliography?
Well, you can do either or. Again, just to be consistent, if it is, say for example, a company report, but there isn't any particular article or any particular named author of that article, you can just refer to the company report from a particular website. If it's just a website reference that you have, that's all you have, well then you can use the shortened version of the website. So it might be a www.uk companyname.com reference that you'll use within the main body of the text. And as you know, Zini, sometimes the addresses can be very lengthy. It's just an alphabetical list of letters and indeed numbers. And if you just put within the condensed version within the main body of the text, and then the more elongated address at the end in your list of references, because sometimes it can look a bit untidy.
It can, and it
in the main body
reading
text
as well.
Very much so. Very much so.
And just to mention there as well, we've been talking about how students need to be very careful with their web sources to make sure that anybody can put anything up on the web. So if you're referencing, you need to feel secure that it's something that is a valid report or is based on something real rather than.
Absolutely, you've got to indicate, and you've got to be sure yourself that this is an academically refereed site or a named company website, because you've got to identify that this information is accurate in the first instance, in that it's timely, it's up to date, it's not a dated or obsolete piece of research or material, and indeed that it gives a true and fair representation of the facts.
Because it is very important for us to mention, journal articles and books and book chapters are all usually peer reviewed, so that's somebody has looked at them and sort of rubber stamped them as being appropriate and being based on solid facts or solid research, whereas on the web we can't be assured that everything out there is the same.
That's true, and we as lecturers often caution students in the usage of, for example, Wikipedia, because given the nature of that particular web resource, the information may not necessarily be as accurate as you would like it to be, nor indeed timely. So again, the golden rule is to ensure that it is coming from a source that you trust, or indeed that it's an academically refereed source. But I think for all information or web-based material, you need constantly to question the veracity and the authenticity of the particular material that you're reading.
Exactly. That's been really helpful, Jennifer. Thanks very much. So you've seen now the importance of referencing, and you've seen how to reference. And the reference handbook is a key item that you need to print and you need to have beside you when you're writing your work and as you're reading things, in order to make sure that you're collecting the correct information that you'll need in the end for your bibliography. Also remember that when supervisors and second readers and markers are reading your dissertation, they'll be aware of the way that you're referencing, and they'll be paying heed to whether or not you're following the proper guidelines. So it's very important to get this set up in the very beginning so it doesn't come back to haunt you at the end. See you next time.